According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, gentrification is a form of neighborhood change that occurs when higher income groups move into low income areas, potentially altering the cultural and financial landscape of the original neighborhood. In the most recent decade, gentrification has manifested in the return to the cities, with redevelopment and investment in many downtown areas of the nation. However, gentrification is a multi-causal issue. Therefore, there are three key aspects to consider when talking about gentrification. The first aspect to consider when talking about gentrification is the historic conditions that perpetuated the issue. In the 1960s, a set of federal standards enacted by banks labeled neighborhoods predominantly resided by people of color as risky and unfit for investment. Therefore, people of color were seen as unfit for loans, causing them to be unable to afford housing. This process, known as redlining, paired with the white flight to suburbs, gave way to urban renewal in these neighborhoods. Urban renewal caused an increase in highway system expansion and mass clearance of homes and businesses. Therefore, investors would purchase and flip these homes in bulk. When these houses were flipped, people started to move into these areas due to low costs and affordability and close proximities to city centers. The next aspect to observe is investment and policy decisions. Neighborhood zoning and the allocation of public transportation and resources interplay with the investments of private developing companies, causing an increase in neighborhood desirability. Through the interplay of economic, political, and cultural aspects, gentrification occurs and causes social inequalities such as displacement and a decrease in social capital. The third aspect to observe is the community impacts. The major issue caused by gentrification is displacement. Displacement can occur through overt evictions or soft evictions, such as rent increases or change in community makeup. Inequalities that arise from gentrification particularly affect different racial and minority groups. Additionally, gentrification is a health issue. The CDC explains that gentrification's displacement of low-income residents causes a lack of access to affordable, healthy housing, healthy food choices, quality schools, transportation, exercise facilities, and social networks. Gentrification has been prevalent in and frequently maneuvering around Boston for decades. Beginning in the early 1990s, gentrification in Boston proliferated into an ongoing spiral that has only gotten worse and harder to control. Over the last 30 years, the median home value in the city of Boston went from around $200,000 to around $600,000, making it significantly more difficult for working-class neighborhoods to be able to pay off their rent. On average, home values in the gentrified tracts are growing by 41%. Meanwhile, income increase is only rising by 29%, consequently making it nearly impossible for lower middle-class workers and below to come even close to making their payment. The rise in housing prices and value in Boston is due to a variety of reasons. Gentrification occurs in Boston similarly to how it occurs in other parts of the country. However, Boston is more affected by the issue due to underlying conditions in the city. First, the 2020 census showed that Boston grew 9.3% between the 2010 and the 2020 counts, a turnaround for the city and nearly double the growth rate in Massachusetts overall. The city is now home to 675,647 people according to the census. This population growth caused a significant increase in a need for housing, leading to more gentrification of urban neighborhoods. Additionally, the city is home to 29 colleges and universities, making the student population around 139,000 people. Therefore, the need for college housing causes gentrification and property value to be at higher rates compared to other U.S. cities. Finally, as these conditions cause property prices to skyrocket, the lack of rent control in Boston perpetuates the rise. Because there is no rent control in Boston, rent continues to rise with no limit, continuing and furthering displacement. In more recent news, neighborhoods in Boston such as East Boston, Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, Mattapan, Hyde Park, and South Boston are anticipated to be further gentrified or susceptible for gentrification in the coming years. As neighborhoods become seemingly more attractive, safe, and affordable, it becomes more likely that white, affluent, non-Boston citizens will migrate to these areas to live. Gentrification of Boston neighborhoods is a prominent issue that has been present in the city for decades. However, despite the city's long history of gentrification, there had not been much acknowledgement of the issue or strong efforts to combat displacement of lower-income residents until more recently. For years, many people did not respond to gentrification in any way because they did not believe in a direct correlation between making the area of living more attractive and the displacement of low-income residents. Despite the lack of effort from many people in the city, communities of color have been more aware of the issue of gentrification since the 1960s because of its segregating effects. One way that these communities tried to gain more attention to the inequity of gentrification and other forms of segregation was through the attempt of communities of color to leave Boston and create their own autonomous Black majority city named after Nelson Mandela. Although this attempt was successful in making people more aware of issues surrounding the displacement of people of color and the segregation and inequity that affects communities of color, it was unsuccessful in continuing the movement to stop the gentrification of Boston neighborhoods at a societal level. In recent years, community organizations like the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative have been acting in a preventative, multi-pronged manner to address gentrification. Additionally, in the Imagine Boston 2030 campaign, the City of Boston explains that they hope to make housing more affordable and to avoid displacement in the coming years. Overall, gentrification is an issue that needs to be addressed through many facets. Although there is much to be addressed and many goals to achieve, the first step of addressing an issue is spreading awareness. Hopefully, in the coming years, with this awareness, the city and organizations will understand the severity of the issue and work harder to address it.